everyone. Welcome back to Go Local Live. I'm Go Local News editor Kate Nagel. Thanks for joining us this Tuesday afternoon with the latest in news and politics. We're going to go national now with Keith Whyte with the National Council on Problem Gambling. Keith, thank you for joining us today.
No, it's my pleasure. Thank you.
Well, I really appreciate your taking the time on the heels of Governor Gina Raimondo signing into law mobile sports betting here in Rhode Island, on the heels of approving sports betting last fall and being implemented here as well. Wanted to touch base with you for a national perspective. Obviously, sports betting new to the legalization front, and then very quickly following are states looking at mobile sports betting, and presents a whole host of issues in terms of what access looks like for the average gambler who's not going to a facility but now has the opportunity to have in the palm of their hands a pretty powerful tool. So let's take it back. When you saw this on the horizon, how did the council approach this?
Well, back in February 2018, the council's board of directors passed a resolution calling on all stakeholders, government, the gambling industry, the leagues, and the media, to adhere to a set of 5 principles when they start to explore the legalization of sports betting. Because we saw this was coming. We knew there was an enormous illegal gambling market now, that there was an incredible appetite for state revenue without raising taxes. And there was a lot of consumer demand, and you combine those things together, and it looked like this was a surge that was going to be coming. And those 5 principles, most importantly, included dedicating some money from some of this new revenue from sports betting to help prevent and treat gambling addiction, to help balance the costs and benefits.
Let's talk a little bit about those resources for individuals who might know they have an issue or might not know they have an issue until a financial result basically makes them alert to what the issue is at hand. A lot of times at casinos, commercials, things as well, you see the basic boilerplate. If you have a problem, call X. If you're arrested and kicked out of a casino, you're presented with options for helping with problem gaming. But are there other ways to get to the average individual gambler who might not be at that level yet, but sort of prevention, intervention for responsible gaming?
Absolutely, because just as mobile technology can increase the risk factors for gambling addiction, it can also increase the protective factors. So we're calling on, again, the industry and regulators to try and adapt and adopt responsible gambling regulations to use that technology to help minimize the costs. Because most people have that one-to-one relationship with their phone. It would be enormously powerful if you were receiving individualized, even personalized responsible gaming messages saying, hey, Kate, maybe you've spent $1,000 in the past month. Would you like to set a limit? Would you like to see this PSA? Did you know that your spending is more than 95% of people in your your group? I mean, there's almost no limit to the amount of behavioral interventions we could provide, or that operators could provide, or regulators could require. It's just really, what really matters is intent. The technology is there. We use it to deliver personalized gambling. Now we want to help use it to deliver personalized, responsible gaming as well.
And you talk about that interaction of getting that type of announcement, that type of reminder. But that needs to be an opt-in function for the individual at the outset to say, yes, I would like to receive these. It's almost like the do not call list. Or could states be required to do this?
Well, I think there's a good mix, and that's one of the things that we're interested in exploring. Unfortunately, as you said earlier, this has been sort of a gold rush. This has been the largest and fastest expansion of gambling in our nation's history, and Rhode Island's a perfect example. Sports betting's the ink is barely even dry before we're now already rushing to mobile. So there's not been a whole lot of time for reflection, for pause. There's not in the law that we saw. There's not a whole lot in there requiring requirements. But to the point of your question, we firmly believe that as a private nonprofit, we firmly believe we can partner with industry to develop very cost-efficient, effective solutions. Using this really advanced technology, partnering with them because they've got really bright minds. It's just asking them to send a slightly different message every so often. And I think, again, the seeds of that partnership are there. But there's a lot that was not included in this expansion of sports betting and this expansion of mobile that's going to have to be filled in. And hopefully the operators are going to seize that opportunity to take a leadership role and to really show that they can manage this expansion, this enormously lucrative franchise they have now without, you know, killing the golden goose and without going a little bit too far and causing a little bit too much damage.
In gambling, as with other addictions, you know, let's talk about a comparison to alcohol, if you will. If someone doesn't think that they have a problem with alcohol and continue to consume, if a person doesn't think they have a problem with gaming, and maybe they are within the confines of what might be financially able for them, but it might be a detriment to either themselves or their families. Again, in addition to, as you said, that one-on-one conversation that could potentially take place over a phone, how else do states engage in these conversations with gamblers?
There's some really exciting stuff happening in Europe where they're using algorithms, or actually, I should back up. Every person that signs up to their online betting accounts completes a problem gambling and risk profile assessment. And then because every single action is tracked, all play is tracked, all deposits are tracked, spend, win, loss, time of bet, duration. They use all those metrics to then monitor in real time the player's profile. And if they see signs that that the gambling behavior is changing and changing not in a good way, they can do all sorts of interventions, messages, you know, information. And so there's some really neat stuff that could be done. But to your point, I mean, I think absolutely money lost or won is one metric. But for someone with a real gambling problem, money is sort of one of the least relevant things. It's things like preoccupation, loss of control. You know, so we look at a lot of indicators like, you know, when's the person playing? You know, they consistently betting more and more between 2 and 5 o'clock in the morning. Could be that they're on a swing shift, or it could be that they're getting up and they're sneaking out of bed with their spouse just to get that money down because they can't not be in action. So yeah, there's a lot we don't know. And frankly, that's why one of our 5 principles is that states must conduct research and that the data the industry collects must be made available to researchers. You know, de-identified, we don't want anybody's names or social security numbers, but to see those patterns of play to help us separate out the 2% from the 98%.
And with problem gamblers, and we do see casinos, I know, have lists of folks who might be gaming the system, if you will. But is there a way legally to shut them off? Or is that just...
Yes.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about that.
Gambling is a privilege, not a right. And it's been clearly established through hundreds of years, dating all the way back from English common law, that you know, you have no right to gamble. And in most cases, it's operated by a private provider who's regulated by the state. You know, gambling, and frankly, in Rhode Island and everywhere else in America, is illegal unless a certain form has been specifically legalized. So there's absolutely no problem with people excluding themselves or setting their own limits. There's also no problem with the state or the operator choosing to set any limits they want. And quite frankly, there's a long history. There's hundreds of years of cases for ruling off people from racetracks and now casinos who have been deemed to be cheats, organized crime. You know, there's a lot of reasons why people can be excluded involuntarily from gaming. So in some sense, this is, we have a much clearer field of action, if you will, than even some other industries or other addictive disorders.
So with the governor signing into law, again, mobile sports betting here in Rhode Island, what will you be keeping an eye on both here and with other examples around the country as we see this roll out?
Well, we're really going to be watching the uptake of gamblers to this new mode of gambling. We're going to be looking at the shift of people from the illegal gambling markets. You know, those who are already betting sports now, often with offshore folks or with their local bookie. We're going to see how many of those shift into the legal market. And one of the things we'll be watching very closely is they may come with higher risk. They've been generations and decades. They've been gambling on credit. They've been gambling without limits. You know, they've been doing lots of bet types that may not still be legal in the United States. So it'll be really interesting to see how that market shifts and if this new legal regulated market is going to be catering to people that are at higher risk. We just did a national survey of 28,000 sports bettors across the United States, including a couple hundred in Rhode Island. And they showed people who bet on sports currently showed double the rate of problematic behaviors as even other bettors. These were people who said that they often felt irritable or restless when they were trying to stop gambling, that they often exceeded the limits they set for themselves. So about 6% right now of current sports bettors in Rhode Island are showing, definite signs of risky behavior, and that's going to be a really important group to watch. And that's why we call on Rhode Island not just to fund the research on this new type of gambling, but to make sure that the data the industry collects is publicly reviewable and available.
And can people finally, Keith, self-regulate if they know that they've gotten into some trouble, might be going into those hours in the morning? Is it in the realm of addiction studies possible for someone to be a responsible mobile sports gamer after knowing that there might be warning signs or issues?
Well, I think in some ways we have to start from the premise that we can never eliminate addiction. We can only just try and minimize and mitigate it. And a lot of these decisions do come down to a personal, individual basis. Many members of Gamblers Anonymous would say that no, you can never be cured. It's always you're in recovery, but you've never recovered. There's some people that are able to sort of moderate their gambling and quit on their own. But just like any addiction, for most people, what it really comes down to is the kinds of support systems you have. And if you're willing to make that character change, if gambling's become a problem for you, it's probably led to some other issues in your life. And if you're willing to make that character change, either through a self-help group, through treatment, maybe even some medications, then you could probably go on to living a healthy way of life, with or even whether or not you choose to gamble or not. So it's a really good question. There are many fold paths into addiction, and there are many paths to recovery. But the one thing we would say is that when a state legalizes something like sports betting, they have to put aside a portion of that new money to make sure that those people who struggle have access to every single possible bit of supports, because that's the only way you're going to maximize your revenue, because people with gambling problems, those social costs end up falling on the state anyways, higher criminal justice and higher healthcare costs. So it's penny wise and pound foolish not to put a portion of those funds aside.
Do you know specifically in the Rhode Island law what that looks like? Is there an allotment, and if so, is it sufficient?
It's our understanding that they're relying on their existing system, which is there are quite a lot of services right now in Rhode Island. However, I would want to talk to every problem gambler in Rhode Island and say, are you getting all the supports you need? Because certainly the state's going to take their cut. Certainly the operators are going to be making a lot of money off this. So it seems like problem gamblers should get their services first. And if there are any deficits in Rhode Island, this is a great time to address it, because this is new money. This is new money that's coming in. It's not coming out of anybody's pockets except those people with gambling problems. And so it's only just and fair. It's the most ethical and economical way for a state to legalize and expand sports betting, to put some of that money back. And even if there's not problems now, we know that it takes between 5 and 10 years, and for most men, for them to seek treatment for their addiction. You want to make sure that you've got a good infrastructure in place. If there are problems in the future, you're prepared to address them.
Well, Keith Whyte with the National Council on Problem Gambling, I appreciate your taking the time to Skype in up to us here in Rhode Island with, again, mobile sports betting just recently signed into law. So, Keith, hopefully we'll have the opportunity to speak with you soon.
It'd be my pleasure. Thank you very much.
Okay, we're going to let Keith go, and that just about wraps up another day here on GoLocal Live in downtown Providence. Be sure to check back in tomorrow at 3 o'clock when Laura Afonso is live with food and drink. And of course, go to GoLocal Facebook and GoLocalProv.com throughout the evening and tomorrow. I'm GoLocal News Editor Kate Nagel.